Bench Opinions. Three idiots with amateur analysis.
Welcome to another episode of Bench Opinions, everybody. Our rugby episode this week. You've got Dominic, Klaus, and myself, Max. We're going to dissect a little bit of the rugby that's happened over the last few weeks. We released a little bit of a neutral episode last week because we were traveling. If you want to listen into what the future of club rugby holds, be sure to listen to that. This week we're going to be talking about the first test between the British and Irish Lions down in Australia. We're going to be dissecting the Baby Boks win in Italy and talking about South Africa's tests against the Barbarians, Italy and Georgia, where that leaves them going into the Rugby Championship. There might be some other topics we dive into. We'll see how we get through. British and Irish Lions down in Oz. Seemed like it was relatively easy. Klaus, first game?
Yeah, first game, obviously the British and Irish Lions have had a couple of games now to sort of find some sort of groove, which they, in my opinion, have finally clicked. I didn't feel like that was the case even 1 or 2 games ago, at least not to the level that they are now. And then with Australia, bit of a game of two halves. First half just completely got away from them. In the second half, they seemed to perform a bit better. I think McDermott really brought some change to the pace of the game and also more control, especially on attack and sniping around the ruck. So that kept the Lions honest around the pillar sort of defensive positions there, opening up the rest of the field for the Australians to attack from. But you could also argue that maybe the British and Irish Lions were like, okay, well, we've kind of got this one in the bag, and maybe took the foot off the gas pedal. So it's difficult to say which one it was.
Yeah, you're definitely a tale of two halves. It looked relatively comfortable in the first half, almost like they were pulling away. Do you think it was more Joe Schmidt at halftime rearranging, maybe getting into their head, saying, "Listen, this is your home Lions series. Get it together," or do you think it's like Klaus said, that they took their foot off the gas?
Well, to be very harsh, like, it's just the worst possible start you can have with those Australians. I think Joe Schmidt must have been tearing his hair out after the first 15-20 minutes, because I wouldn't say they handed it to them, but they kind of did. That from the first passage of play, the Lions were on top of them, and I just think I think everyone kind of was speaking about what are Australia's chances going into this tour, and you felt like early on they were going to have to try and somehow gain small margins, and to sort of lie down and kind of give the British and Irish Lions the impetus that early on, I think is a real dagger to the heart. Who knows, they could bounce back. Obviously the second half helps them a lot. They've got Skelton coming back in for the second game, and yeah, as you said, someone like McDermott came on, changed the game a lot. I think the British and Irish Lions, particularly Farrell, was apparently fuming at a lot of the play. There's questions to be asked about Curry and that tackle. I don't know how you see it. I think 9 times out of 10 you're probably giving a yellow for that tackle, and that maybe changes some of the dynamic. But I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really change what happened on the field. And I think honestly, just man for man, the Lions side came out the blocks too hard for them.
Yeah. It's probably a thing of meeting that intensity early on, and like you're saying, it's like that first day in prison, you've got to pick the biggest guy, and just
punch him right in the mouth.
And that was sort of Australia's only chance, is really win the first 15 minutes and then put them under pressure from there.
And you look at the 3 standout performers for the British and Irish Lions, it's almost telegraphed. It's Curry had a fantastic game, Byrne, man of the match, 23 tackles, and then just Finn Russell with a bit of a masterclass as well. Just looked so at ease, sort of distributing the ball, 14 points for him as well. So I think it really just is that gulf that everyone knew was there, but I think a lot of people were a little bit disappointed that the application from Australia, particularly in those first moments to say, okay, let's try and get the home crowd on our side, was not there.
Yeah. Klaus, you picked Australia to win on Super Brew as the only one. So you must have been very disappointed.
No, I obviously just clicked the wrong button. No, I did pick Australia to win. My thinking was like, I think they are going to win one test match in this series. Going by what happened on Saturday, it's now seemingly more likely that they're going to win the third one. If the British and Irish Lions win the second one, then they'll probably field a different team, and Australia will probably want to not lose with a clean, deny the British and Irish Lions from having a clean slate. So I will pick them in the third match. But I mean, there are signs that Australia could do it, but they just as Dominic said, they let the game get away from them far too early on, and then from then it was just a catch-up game that they're not physically matched to accomplish.
That is an interesting dynamic, though, in this tour, I feel, just because of the golf in class. Like, I think the British and Irish Lions, it'll be interesting to see what Farrell does if they go on to win the next test match, if he decides to kind of give some of the other guys a run out, or if because of the golf, and because of the legacy that you want to maybe have is everyone looking back, you want that 3-0. Whereas I think if you go to South Africa or you go to New Zealand, I think you just want to win the tour. I don't think you care what the score is. Yeah. It'll be quite interesting to see what he decides to do.
I can imagine there's a little bit of pride associated to the 3-0 thing. Australia made a little bit of a comeback in the second half. You could see that there was some things clicking. There's some players coming back that were injured. So the second game could be a little bit of a clean slate. The Lions, though, probably do have one more gear that they can shift into, you'd think, which is probably worrying from an Australian standpoint because they were playing them in second gear. And if the Lions do switch up and click even more, they are playing a midweek game again. They're playing something in Pacifica. What are they called?
Yeah, 15 Pacifica or something like that, yeah.
And I think we spoke about this in one of the previous episodes already, is obviously the Lions coming together as a new group have to gel and sort of get some momentum going. Australia only played Fiji going into this Lions series. Is it a mistake for them not to have one or two more games just to, Joe Schmidt's been with them only since the end of last year. He took them through a relatively successful end of year tour where you just saw like there was some momentum going. But then now there's been 6 months in between that where they haven't played together. And then just to play one game before you go into a British and Irish Lions series might just be sort of jumping into the pool cold.
I don't know if it's a mistake because I don't know if they had any other options in terms of organizing a team to play. Yeah. Considering that there's no international window.
You probably not get any big nations down, that's for sure. But you could definitely get a Georgia,
Samoa or something like that.
Samoa, Tonga, any of the island nations, I guess, or of the European clubs, or the European countries might have come down. It might not even be to get yourself ready from a gameplay thing, but just sort of get yourself into a rugby rhythm, of playing with that team 2 weeks in a row, and then in the third week,
and honestly, give someone a bit of a routing. I mean, this is a good segue into something we wanted to talk about. Maybe we, instead of talking about it later, I think that shows the challenges. In Ireland, for example, second string, third string island team, almost you could argue, absolutely routing Portugal. That shows how difficult it is and how big that step is up into the first tier nations. We saw Samoa get absolutely walloped by Scotland. There's been a big downfall there. I think Fiji's one of the promising kind of lights that kind of is floating around. With them they beat Scotland, right? Yeah, they actually ended up beating Scotland. Yes. So, as we said, I think maybe either you try and organize a second Fiji test match.
Yes.
But I think it is, it's obviously difficult. It's how do you prepare yourself?
It might also be too much rugby for Australia then, because, they are playing 3 tests against the British and Irish Lions. Then they played that warm-up game against against Fiji. All the other nations also only play 3 games in this, or 3 or 4 games in this series. So I don't know if there's also like a limit on the amount of game time that you want to give these players. But any more standout performances that any of you want to highlight from the first game?
For Australia, the only standout player for me is Tate McDermott. Mm-hmm. And from the British and Irish Lions side, you have to say that Tom Curry played incredibly well. Yeah. Obviously, Byrne, man of the match, but Tom Curry played extremely well. And then Finn Russell, as Dominic mentioned, the center pairing for me is a big standout, and the way that they sort of interact with Finn Russell, obviously, all Scottish boys. That combination of the 3 of them is really, really cool, and is firing on all cylinders.
And big hats off to the Scottish rugby, because I think for them, you look at the fact that Farrell has got a very close association to Ireland, and the Irish having really good centres as well. For him to then end up going through those combinations is quite a tip of the hat to them. I think one has to give Farrell a little bit of praise as well, in the sense that of how he set the team up. I think in the sense that they very much kind of prioritized the physical element of it.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, if you can, if you're looking to assert dominance over another nation, it's something that South Africa uses often, because we know that's one of our strengths. And I think if you're, maybe even if he, in the back of his mind, he's thinking, they're not gelling as well as I maybe would have wanted them coming to this first test match, to prioritize something like the physical side of it. And it was clear. They were so physical. Also in the set pieces and scrum, I think they were just, and you kind of almost automatically create a marker for momentum.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be acknowledged and has to be praised. And I think, getting over the line in this first test really sets them up for more success. And you might see a way more open style of play now in the second couple of games, and you might see them really put their foot down.
Do we see Farrell making a lot of changes for the second game, or would that be silly, changing a winning team?
I don't know what the injury is like, so maybe there's an injury or two that needs changing, but I think you've got so much depth at the Lions, he could make a whole bunch of changes. I don't think he will make too many, but he could, and I don't think it would change the strength of that team.
Some heavy and surprising criticism for Lowe not having a good game. A lot of people just felt that he didn't step up at all and was very sloppy in phases. So maybe there, if he's ruthless, I don't know what he gets from it if he leaves Lowe out, because Lowe is clearly good enough. And I don't know if that's kind of the marker you set down. I think it is a balancing act. It's like where we go from here. You can't think too far in the future. So I don't think Farrell's going to be thinking, what is this going to do for my relationship with Lowe moving forward? He's going to think about the next test match.
No, it has to.
And therefore, I think maybe you would see some of the guys that he feels didn't step up. I think the forward pack will stay the same because they were just so dominant.
Yeah.
But I think, and then you spoke about the centre pairing and Finn Russell. So I think maybe some of one of the back three kind of gets a flip out, and I don't think that wins or loses them the game.
Maybe they bring a Marcus Smith in, for example, at 15, just to get him in there. It's pretty much a like for like in terms of quality.
Yeah,
different
for
styles, but like for like in quality.
Klaus, you said Australia will find it tough to win the second one, and you think they'll rather win, or they'll have a better chance of winning a third. Dom, do you think Australia can level the series?
No, and I've said from the word go, I think unfortunately it's going to be a golf in class that's too much for them to kind of overcome. And I think, as I said, I think the little window they had to maybe try and up the impetus and kind of get something or get a light, I think they missed that heavily, and it's going to be pretty disappointing for the rest of the tour, in my opinion. I think the only way they could possibly get a win is in the last test, and that's if Farrell decides to ring the changes. But given the context of Australia being so weak and the legacy and everyone thinking, hey, you should really win this 3-0, I think Farrell sticks to his guns and makes sure they get the 3 wins.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Skelton and Valentini potentially coming back, because I think it was an interview with Dan Bigger and or Hooper, and they were talking about the Australian teams of the past have always sort of physically not necessarily dominated, but fronted up, and then just unleashed their backs, and their backs have always been incredible. If you look at what's the guy's name who was then relegated to rugby league because he was so homophobic, and
Israel
Folau, yeah. Like the likes of that. I mean, he's a bit of a dick, but like
your Quade Coopers,
your Quade Coopers,
Curly Beals,
Kenya, etc.
Kenya, they've always had a very hectic firing power in the back line.
Yeah.
So if they can build some sort of a platform for those guys to get unleashed, then they could front up a little bit. But I also don't see them winning the second test.
Disappointing because that there's all this build up to the Lions series, and I suppose if you're there traveling as a fan, then all those warm up games, whether they be against the Reds, the Brumbies, the Tars, that's all part of the sort of the hype of it. But it's been blowouts every week that we've watched since that Argentina game, and this last one wasn't any different. If the next one's the same, then the whole series just sort of peters out, in my opinion, as a neutral, because it's just too dominant, and then all of this build up seems to just flow away, and you've got one dead rubber match which could lead to a 3-0, but the rest of the world will look at that and say, listen,
nobody cared about that last game.
Look, I mean, it's a sad judgment on the game in Australia, and you do feel sometimes like we spoke about the decline in the side. We're talking about incredible sides or players they've had in more recent past. But if you look at their side, sort of the turn of the century, they were just terrifying to play against. George Gregan and Mortlock and all these guys that you just played against them and you thought there's no chance here. I remember us going to Australia, so losing 49-0. That's just so far from reality now. And with the World Cup coming up, I don't know how they're going to do it. It's 2 years away.
Yeah.
I think they would have to mount a serious challenge there to try and get people away from the other dominant sports in Australia. So that's the sad thing as well. And then, look, Argentina haven't done themselves any favors against England. That's something that we didn't want to dive too deeply into, but you feel like Argentina had an opportunity here to kind of stake their claim to maybe getting a Lions tour down the line as a change up of things. Yeah, they haven't really taken that opportunity, to be honest.
People, we've got that one reel up on TikTok saying that we all believe Argentina are going to dominate England. And people are loving commenting on that these days.
Definitely not something that English will let go, for sure.
Making a resurgence.
Yeah. Before we nail Australia to the cross, we'll obviously keep an eye on that game. Could still swing either way. We might be sitting here next week saying, what the hell do we know?
We got it wrong
it
again.
Would definitely be on point for us because that's the way it usually goes. So if you find us sitting on this couch bashing your team,
probably bet money
we're
on
probably
them.
wrong.
We're probably wrong. So
you should probably put money on them.
Yeah. Leave the British and Irish Lions in Australia behind now. Move to something way more important. Probably the biggest rugby event happening at this point in time.
This is true.
Was the U20 Championship hosted in Italy, won by the baby Boks for only the second time in their history. They beat the defending champions England on their way. They thumped Australia. They beat Argentina, and in the final, I would say, not too comprehensively dealt with New Zealand.
Yeah.
The talk in South Africa is about all the talent that was on show there, because on the one hand, there was some big boys there playing typical South African rugby, but on the other hand, there was some rugby being played there that people would have called atypical for South Africa.
Yeah.
Can you put any emphasis on the SA20s in terms of the play that's being played there, the people coming through, and whether that sort of gives you a look into what Springbok rugby could be, or is it just the carelessness and carefreeness of youth?
A side note, and this is a very interesting thing that I didn't know. And first of all, I was very surprised at the fact that we hadn't won it more than once. That was the first point. The second thing is that this is the first time it's been hosted at this time of year, this tournament. And this is the first time we've been able to send a full-strength under-20s team in quite a few years, because in previous years we've had clashes with the Varsity Cup, the Curry Cup in parts, and other sort of tournaments where our best under-20 players have been involved. So first of all, good factor to kind of think about as well. So it's good to see that we've been able to give our best under-20 players a platform and a stage and everything. So that's the first thing. I think maybe one of the reasons why we've struggled to kind of get it over the line in the past. So that's the second thing. What I find very interesting is that when we were ripping teams to shreds, we broke all the records in terms of point scoring within the group phases and leading into the final. And I was really worried that we wouldn't be able to play the type of rugby to get it across the line. And that's I think the big thing that surprised me the most, is that we managed the game extremely well against the All Blacks. Ben Smith, obviously, of course, speaking mostly about the red card.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll leave that aside. That's the thing that I found the best. And I weirdly found sort of an identity and DNA within that side that I can kind of also see within what Rassi's kind of doing now and trying to move to this more modern style of game.
I'd phrase like this whole long introduction with this nice question at the end.
And he answered a completely different
question. He just said, listen, I have something to say and I will say it now.
Hey, man. I had a lot to say. I'm filled with pride.
We'll move on from my question.
I can answer your question.
Okay. I don't even remember what it was.
You're asking about the DNA and if we played the way that we did because of
is the talent on show there a glimpse of what rugby could be for South Africa in the future?
The talent on show the talent on show that I think you need to take with a pinch of salt, because first of all, when you play senior rugby, you're playing a span of like 15 years of age difference, right? Here you're playing a span of maybe 2 to 3.
Yeah.
Plus minus. There might have been like outliers that are a bit younger than that, but that's kind of the ballpark that you're playing with. So you could have a generational sort of like spike, and it's sort of
your talent, your pool of players to select from is just smaller.
Exactly. So and vice versa for your opponent, right? So yes and no, but our guys did play very well, and they do look pretty like as rugby players look pretty solid. Also going forward, there's been a lot of call, and you spoke about this off air. There's been a lot of call for some of these guys, like maybe going straight into like professional the sort of
senior rugby.
Senior rugby.
The senior Springboks
I
squad.
think that's a bit ridiculous, because let these guys front up against like the senior players and then like see how good they play then. But there are players that have high potential. The likes of like a Hashim Peed, amazing player. I think he's got potential. He must stay fit. He must stay uninjured. And continue on his trajectory, not let the game get to his head, all those sort of things. Jooste is another one of those guys. Moyo, another one of those guys. Riley Norton, depending if he goes to cricket or if he goes to rugby, but in both he seems like the type of guy who could be successful. So they're definitely a handful of guys you could see eventually being in the Springbok team, but I don't think you can judge it off of an under-20 championship.
To be fair, though, the course for them going to senior rugby is less about senior Springbok rugby and more about creating pathways within senior rugby for them now to get into their franchises. I think someone very interesting is Peed. He broke all of DuPont's records for every pretty metric that there is for under-20 rugby. DuPont had the record as a scrum half. Now he has it in terms of meters gained, points scored, etc., etc. There's an interesting case because he's actually moved away from your beloved Stormers and moved to the Lions because there is a more realistic pathway for him to get first team rugby sooner. There's talk of Moyo going straight back to the under 18s at the Sharks. A lot of people are saying that's ludicrous. Obviously, they look for ways to kind of integrate them into it. Maybe Varsity Cup is the way to go. I feel like maybe that's a step too far down. Looking at something like Curry Cup, start getting them into to those systems. But it is definitely a step up. And I think if you look at the teams that we've had in the past, the amount of guys that have played in those teams in the past that have sort of disappeared into the abyss, compared to that team in 2012, I think it was, that one with Creel and Pollard and Surf and Tain and all these guys that went on to have crazy good careers. Those are really exceptions. And how do you bleed them? And I think in rugby, even more so than something like football, the jump is so much higher and there's so many more variables in terms of how you can break through. From physicality to also just specialized skill sets, right? I mean, it takes time to become a good scrummer at a senior level. For example.
My worry is like some of these guys are, 17, 18, 19. Their bodies aren't fully developed yet. And then you throw them into an arena with, the likes of like an Asanati and Klabakanya. And he's going to munch them. And then you're just going to create injuries.
They're all going to go to Coach Dan's farm, and they're all going to be
Mark Lane.
I mean, the physical jump up is obviously a massive one. One could argue what the best stage for development is, whether it's sending them down to their age, letting them sort of mature there, bringing them into the big leagues where they have to learn quicker. I think it's sort of.
You're going to have to go case by case basis.
They were talking about this on Boks Unpacked, and they were talking about a schoolboy who's showing a lot of talent, and I can't remember his name, but there's probably also something to be said about sort of just taking this under-20 championship, celebrating for it for what it was, and then putting these players back into their teams and leaving them. Only the seldomest and fewest of athletes go into media spotlight at a very young age and rise up to their potential. Most of them sort of get hyped up to be something that they're not. They're not ready, and they peter out. It happened with Coven Bosch. It happened a little bit with Pat Lambie, but he suffered a lot of injuries. But there's enough evidence. It happened with Goosen as well when he was still playing for the Cheetahs. We, as South Africans, are so passionate and we're so excited by the talent coming through there. It might just be worth saying, all right, thank you for what you've done, and we'll see you in 2 or 3 years, unless you are that guy who can stand in the spotlight and say,
You can have a
"Give me
Steven
the ball."
Kitsoff, right? Steven Kitsoff came in at a really young age. It's not impossible,
Well, I mean, what's
but
the
as you said, it's the rarest of rare.
UCT guy who's now at the Cheetahs?
Makaza.
Kaza, he scored a brace against Georgia, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some people who might want the limelight and who say, no, as soon as I'm in it, I'm taking this and I'm running.
I think the one thing that should calm us all down is the last time we did win a Junior Rugby World Cup, I think 7 of the 15 starting players went on to earn senior Springbok caps. So we've done it before, and I think 7's a pretty good ratio given the fact that people develop at different ages, particularly the different positions. I think, there's some stories there also where you probably think someone like Chili Boy Ralapele, where you think, wow, his career could have been so different. But nonetheless, he did captain the Springboks on a couple of occasions, and 7 out of 15 is a good ratio. And if 7 of these boys get through to the senior box side and play at a similar level, sort of respectively, then I think we've done well.
Yeah, definitely. Leaving the juniors behind, moving to the seniors.
Let's go.
Seniors in parentheses, because I think Rassie managed to trial and test a lot of different players in this incoming tour. A game against the Barbarians, 2 games against Italy, and a game against Georgia. I think almost 50 points scored in each of them. And I think, like Rassie pointed out, other than the first test against Italy, the defense was also pretty solid. And I think he played something like 50 different players over the course of those 4 games. So really bodes well, obviously, for 2027 World Cup, giving people a little bit of a look in, and has definitely given some people the chance to put their hand up going into the Rugby Championship. Anyone on your mind in particular that's maybe not a stand-in but has come up and said, I wouldn't mind a game?
Especially in this last game that we played against Georgia, I think a position that has been dominated by the likes of Dialende, Creole, and Andre Esterhazen now. I think Kanan Moody really put his hand up. He really performed well. His kicking and grubber kicking game was good. He scored a phenomenal try carrying 2 Georgians on his back. His defensive work was strong. He worked off the ball a lot. And they finally played him in position. Well, what I think should be his position.
Yeah.
Normally when he's played for the Boks, he's played at like 14 or I think always at 14, maybe once or twice at 11 if I'm not mistaken. But 13 I think is his position, and he played it so well.
Yes,
and,
he did.
And I think that was a big standout for me. Obviously, you have the likes of an Edward van der Merwe, who every time he gets an opportunity, goes and scores a try and works hard on defense. And I think he even scored 2 tries, was it?
I think
2
he's
tries?
got five tries in 3 games now.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, he's a try-scoring machine. I mean, the fact that he's already, 28 years old or something like that is crazy, that he's gotten such a late break in his international career, but always cool to see him on the field and always brings that electric. There's something to say about coloured dudes with scrum caps. I think it's just... That's the combination we need to go with.
Until it stops, it's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
No, I think with Rassie actually came out today and made some interesting comments, I thought, and he said that I didn't really see it this way. I felt we could have been way more experimental, personally.
Oh, for sure.
But he actually said that this was very experimental. The last 3 games, and looking forward for the squad at the Rugby Championships, expect something very experienced, something that we know.
For sure.
The interesting thing, though, is that he named 4 players that they still want to give a go, which I find interesting. So he called out both the Hendrickse brothers, that they still feel like they want to give a chance, Kewan Horn and Renzo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Those are the 4 players that he called out, which I find very interesting as well. I think at some point we're going to see the Hendrickse brothers again, just because they've been kind of part of the furniture. If it's based on merit, I don't know. But clearly, I think you could say more for Jordan than you could say for Jaden. I think Jaden's had a tough time of it, but yet would provide continuity in the purest form. And then Kewan Horn is another interesting shout at 13, because that's someone that Rassie has called out.
15.
And 13.
Okay.
Really?
Never
I think
seen
that's
him.
what... Oh, no, sorry. I'm confusing with Ethan Hooker, the other white guy in the back line. No.
I've never seen
No.
you play at 13.
Sorry, I confuse it. But yeah,
Ethan
Kewan Horn's
Hooker.
another interesting one, particularly given the competition at fullback already.
Yeah.
So interested to see how that kind of develops. But I think the standout guys are your Chitukas. Chituka was just incredible. And I think, as you said, Kanan had a fantastic game. Edward van der Merwe creates headaches, but it's exactly the kind of headaches you want coming into that side, because he's just been so convincing. There's no question marks around him. I think if anything, unfortunately, it bodes not so well for someone like Mapimpi, who also had a good game though when he played. Yeah. But I think sort of long term, you might see kind of Edward come in on as more of
He's got a few of the traits that Mapimpi had as well. He's not as much of a space creator as he is sort of a poacher and like a guaranteed finisher. You know, he's not.
So he provides you with a bit of a different profile, and yet 100% has shown that he's good enough to be in a Springbok jersey. So that's going to be interesting. Interesting little moment though for Sasha as well. We need to talk about that. He had a far from good game. I think he has his own higher standards that he has to live up to, but that's an interesting one. Out of sorts, particularly against someone like Georgia, where you'd think he'd really flourish.
So he injured himself in the warm-up, and he had a hip pointer injury. So he said he really wanted to play, and Rusty gave him a chance, but Rusty said
it might be more concerning that he's
really
gotten injured again.
That's true.
Yeah, and that was just in the warm-up. And he reckons that's why his game was off, was because of that injury.
I mean,
because he didn't slot his penalty kicks. Are we sure it's Sasha on the field, or was Marnie made a resurgence again?
I don't know if one can laud Andre Pollard enough for the player he is, but also that kicking. I mean, you could put that man on in the 71st minute and he's just come out of the club and he'll probably still slot 3 from 3 in the last 9 minutes.
And he actually played a very free-flowing game when he was on. And Sasha played a more sort of what Andre used to play, kind of. So it was an interesting turn of events, that.
Obviously, a completely new front row against Georgia. They did meet a Georgian team that wanted to disrupt a little bit. Few struggles here and there, but overall, I think all three of them will have been happy with the game they played. I think 2 of them even scored tries on their debut.
Didn't Marnus van der Merwe also score 2?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. True.
Yeah,
I think he's
Mol
pretty
looked to work well as well. That
Yeah.
was an interesting factor that maybe didn't come to the fore as much against Italy. One could criticize a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking good.
I think all in all, we've come out of this incoming series with, I think, exactly what we expected.
More answers than questions for sure, yeah.
The thing with the front row that you just mentioned, Marnus van der Merwe playing so well as he did, let's see how he goes against a better team such as New Zealand or...
We'll try against Australia first. You know, that's the next step up now for us.
Australia, New Zealand, Argentina when they're in the mix as well. Bongi, on the other hand, didn't play so well.
Yeah,
his lineouts were a bit of a problem again. He seems to be going through a spate of bad form. So having a guy like Marnus right there pushing for that jersey, and who's the other hooker we've got?
Malcolm Marks.
No. I mean one of the new guys. Is it Jan-Henrik Wessels?
Yeah. Jan-Henrik Wessels.
So, you got those 2 guys pushing Bongi. And if Bongi doesn't get his shit together, then, these guys are ready there to slot in.
Well, I mean, I think with Bongi, it's pretty clear that he's not going to make the next World Cup just because he's too old.
Probably,
It's probably more of like none of them would ever give up their jersey voluntarily, and they'll fight tooth and nail to start every time, but it's probably more of like the same which you'll be seeing with Villiers, a sort of a slow phasing out. And if he does return to form and like miraculously becomes the next Dion Fourie for the Springboks, that's all good.
Yeah.
But
I think it's not idealistic also to think that there's conversations happening behind the scenes as well. And I think Russie's so good at sort of letting players know exactly what role they have to play. And, the same way he took someone like Skalk Brits to one of the World Cups, etc. I'm sure those conversations are happening with people like Villy and Bongi and saying, hey, listen, this is kind of where we see you. Worst comes to worst, you're phased out by date X. Prove me wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And go from there.
Also take on the role of a mentor, for the younger guys coming through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think they pride themselves on that because, you invest part of yourself into these players. You see them do well. And it's kind of like, well, I've got a bit of an imprint on them. I've got a bit of me is still playing within those players.
But I think if you're looking at the 3 games and you're looking at some of the questions marks that were there, sort of, trying to start finding a new front row, with continued dominance in the scrum like we've had, looking at trying to start finding options at centre pairing, I would say those were probably two of the biggest question marks. Obviously, looking at someone that can really step up and look at that 15 jersey. I don't think that question has been answered yet between Fassi and Willemse, but they've both put their hands up heavily for that 15 jersey. So that's exactly what I think you would have wanted coming out of this. And now, as you said, the next step up is Australia, and then those questions hopefully continue to be answered by the guys that step up and show what they got.
Yeah. Anything else on the Springboks? Good.
Oh, another standout player, Grant Williams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah.
That guy comes on and he just brings something else to that
Definitely.
team.
So good to see him back. A lot of energy.
Faf didn't play badly or anything like that. He also had a really good game, but then had to come off because of HIA, and Grant came back on again, and it's just that pace that he brings.
A lot of pace, a lot of
unreal.
energy. Very good to see.
And just precise passing, which is important.
Let's just quickly dip into some rugby news in general before we say goodbye. The Bulls have appointed a new coach, Johan Ackermann, coming back to South Africa. He was actually just with us baby Boks in Italy. He's taking over the Bulls job. Is it a good appointment in both of your opinions?
I think in terms of like a coach who knows how to coach South Africans really well, I think yes. He's been successful with South African franchises, i.e. the Lions. So I think it is a good appointment in that sense. But I don't think one should expect anything from him in the next 1 to 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to take time. I think there's a lot of trust that needs to be rebuilt there at the Bulls side. After Jake White got let go, more and more stories started flowing out of that camp, that there was sort of different fractions within the team, and there was a lot of sort of almost like politics being played between the players and coaching staff. So I think there's a lot of trust and unity that needs to be rebuilt there. I don't know if that's one of Johan Ackermann's strengths, but in terms of getting a ragtag team of guys together and being able to do some damage, I think that's where he's going to shine. Once he can get those guys united and then implement a game plan, I think there'll be some cool stuff. And with the likes of Henry Pollard coming back as well, I think that they'll have somebody to rally around in terms of like a mental
A lot of
leader.
experience coming in. Yeah.
So
Fontaine as well.
It might go quicker than we think, but one definitely shouldn't expect too much too soon.
Yeah, interesting angle also with his time at Gloucester. I think that, obviously it's not in the URC, but I think just being within the sort of structures of European rugby and Northern Hemisphere rugby and everything, I think that brings a wealth of value as well to the team. Knowing the conditions, etc. I think maybe something that Jake White, albeit he was in France, maybe didn't have as much, one could even argue, with most of your rugby then being against teams off the island, right, in the URC. So interesting there as well. But as you said, I think with his time at the Lions, he showed that he can really get the most out of a squad. And I think that's what you're looking at now, because the reality is that the Bulls they've made some good signings, albeit, but I think that's what all the South African teams have to maybe start learning, is how do we get more out of squads and box a little bit more clever, particularly with us trying to take on the likes of Leinster. And I think that's where maybe he kind of has that X factor and in trying to get the best out of a squad.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because he himself, I think, actually said in a quote that it's the first time that he's sort of arriving at a team that's not in peril, and he doesn't have to sort of do a lot with very little. He's actually got a wealth of talent, experience, resources in that team to succeed. So it's a different challenge for him as well. The Bulls are deemed not a failure, but they've gotten to 3 finals in 4 years, and lost everyone.
Yeah.
So success is not necessarily winning, like you said, because
The Lions are the same, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, they also got to Super Rugby finals, I think, 2 or 3 times in a row.
Before he came.
No, whilst he was there. And never won it. So let's see.
So I think this ties into what you were saying, is that expectations of him shouldn't be to win just because the Bulls have come second so often. It's like you said, it's building a new culture. It's sort of setting up that team maybe for wins in 2 to 3 years. I think they've got the talent to compete, like you said, with Henry Pollard coming in and the squad that they've already got. But interesting to see how he does back in South Africa. On the flip side of it, Jake White, is this the end of his franchise coaching in South Africa? Or do you think another team would take... It's not a risk because he is a good coach, but it's sort of the equivalent of hiring a Jose Mourinho with just what comes with it, seemingly, which is just sometimes like a lot of the circus.
Well, the Sharks could do with a new coach. Nah, the thing is, I think Dominic's spoken about this. I don't remember if it was on air or off air, but the coaching style that he has is very like militant. He's not about culture, and that's maybe not with the times at the moment. So I can't see a South African franchise wanting to take that on, especially having close ties with the Bulls and being able to like, you know, get behind the scenes information on his way of dealing with things. But I think he will have a career somewhere else internationally.
Yeah, I think he's a bit of a poison chalice now. I think the way that all played out in public is just very hard to hide. And I think, you know, you've seen it in football. You mentioned Jose Mourinho, but there is an element of the game maybe just moving past him a little bit. I think even in rugby, the big tough guys, but I think there's a lot of, if you look at the soft skills that someone like Rassie has, all the good coaches we associate, like there's a lot of soft skills there. And I mean, this only goes off me having read his book post 2007. He's a disciplinarian, and I don't know if that works. And if you start looking at, and I'm not blaming anyone for anything here, but if you start looking at the fallout with some of the players there now, but also cases like Spoon, Corsi, for example, etc., you start to wonder and think, you know, if that high pressure environment is really what's needed for the modern rugby player.
Just quickly in other news, we spoke about Argentina and England already. That's obviously very sad for Argentina not to be able to beat them in one game at least at home. Sort of puts them into the Rugby Championship on the back foot a little bit. In terms of second-tier nations, though, what Ireland did to Portugal can be seen as severely damaging to the cause because, you know, the top teams want to get better, so they're only going to want to play top teams. It's sort of probably developing to what happens in cricket now and then, is that your money and your talent sort of wants to play against each other. And when you do get a chance to step up, you hope that those second-tier nations can put up a bit of a fight. And it's never a good look when any team ships 100.
I mean, they got walloped in the first game as well, Portugal. And on the back of the first game, the Portuguese coach was heavily criticized, and rightfully so, because apparently the performance was terrible.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, you know, most of my players only got back from holiday like 5 days ago. And there's the first question is, you know, surely you need to start building up the resources to get guys back. And it's all tied to salaries and tied to how do we get these dudes to come in and you pay them essentially per day. And apparently those resources won't give it to him. So you're playing, you know, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, unfortunately, on that level. And I think that's where you start to see the benefits of Japan and a very good domestic league and the ability to kind of have a lot of players playing professional rugby. And it leaves one of two things for countries like Spain and Portugal that are trying to knock on that door is you either have to try and look at something domestically, which is very far-fetched, I think, or you have to really start creating good funnels to start getting them into the French setups and playing similar to what Argentina are forced to do because they just aren't able to breed anything from inside their own borders.
There's probably something to be said about countries that are sort of on the brink of making a step up. Your Spain now, which is showing some potential. Uruguay, Chile are sort of in and around there. Portugal was there during the World Cup, sort of just taken a step back. For all of them to sort of combine and just play regular rugby, whether that's clubs playing against each other in sort of a new competition that's not going to garner that much interest, but just keeps them playing, because that's seemingly what they miss is. Roy Keane mentioned it on a footballing sense again when he was playing for Ireland. There was just a lack of professionalism when he got to Ireland. There was no balls at training. There was just like. Everything seemed like it was this rinky-dink hobby operation. And without the Portugal Rugby Association ever meaning it, that's sort of what it seems like it is. It's sort of like this Saturday rugby club rocking up to then play Ireland, which is just, as soon as you put structures of professionalism into it, that might already just be that little bit of difference you need just to not get absolutely walloped like that.
Yeah. You could also consider, like, you got the likes of Romania, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Belgium. There are nations of that sort of size in terms of rugby following. They should, and they already are playing against one another.
Will, yeah.
But I think you need to create a tournament, like a proper tournament where you.
I think this is what the inaugural year this year was of the. I think they called it the European Challenge, or something, where you had Belgium, Romania, all these teams we've just mentioned playing in a bona fide competition. So I think the seeds are there. But but as you said, I think it's a balance between domestically trying to do something. Look at the fall of Samoa, for example. They've been pillaged as well, unfortunately, by New Zealand to a large degree. All their best players just get out of Samoa soon. But they've fallen in all formats. They used to have a great 7-side as well. They're just non-event anymore, really. That's the issue is, and now let's talk about another second-tier nation, Zimbabwe, qualifying for the World Cup.
Yeah.
And a lot of people saying that there's a real chance that Zimbabwe are going to have a Curry Cup team.
Oh, really?
That's fantastic. Off the back of this. And everyone's saying that is just a no-brainer. And a lot of people say, listen, you can't underestimate the impact that Argentina having the Jaguares, both in the Curry Cup and Super Rugby, what that did for rugby in Argentina. So that's where you got to go.
Yeah. Big shout out to Zimbabwe for making it back to the World Cup for the first time since 91.
Huge support, emotional scenes as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
Beating Namibia, unfortunately, our other neighbors. But it'll be exciting.
Yeah. I think that wraps it up for this week. We've covered a lot of it. There's a lot of rugby coming up this week. There's not a lot of rugby coming up this week. There's one big game coming up this weekend. It's the second test between the British and Irish Lions and Australia. So we'll report back on that next week. And we've got a What a Week episode coming up at the end of the week. If you want to hear us generally chat about life, love, and disabled people on public transport.
Romance.
That's it. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. And if you totally disagree with anything we've said, we love to hear about it in the comments.
Subscribe and then comment, yeah.
So you can hear us to say it again next week.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.